Well, welcome everyone. Good evening, and a very warm welcome to the first in our Future of Legal Practice series for the current academic year, the academic year that has just begun in earnest. So the format for tonight is that we'll have a seminar which will finish by 7 p.m. And it will include Richard's presentation followed by a Q&A. There is a Q&A chat function which will be reviewed by Mike Butler, who's on the call, as the director of the Professional Law Institute, and myself. So do feel free to ask questions. You can put them in at any time, and we'll pick them up for review. So the event is hosted by the Professional Law Institute here at the Dixon Poon School of Law. The PLI is currently running a postgraduate diploma in law and an MSc in law and professional practice. And we've just welcomed our third cohort, and I'm delighted to see some familiar names from that cohort on the screen here. The Future of Legal Practice series was launched in 2019 and has featured many valued voices, including law firm partners, in-house counsel, LexisNexis, the Law Commission, academics, the International Bar Association, technologists, and many more on subjects including the impact of technology on legal services, digital assets, practicing for justice in the future, and future skills. Do feel free to check out our event page for past recordings. We'll get that in the link there. So tonight's subject matter relates to AI projects within the legal sector. So the PLI and King's more broadly have a number of ongoing projects relating to generative AI, and our law school benefits from Professor Dan Hunter's world-renowned expertise in this field. And I'd very much recommend to participants on this call and to those watching the recording to give Dan a follow on LinkedIn for great updates on generative AI, LLMs, that sort of thing. As well as Richard's excellent account as well on LinkedIn. We've been using LLMs in teaching. We've been exploring capabilities and crucially shortcomings as well with bespoke tutoring, feedback outputs, use cases, and I can personally reflect on the value of critically evaluating with PLI students LLM outputs against more traditional resources for legal and commercial viability. Some of the students here have been writing dissertations on, for example, ethics and potential mechanics of algorithmic justice. And it's in light of this field of interests that I first met our speaker during an AI seminar he was running at Browne Jacobson's London office, in which he very kindly allowed academics to attend and infiltrate those corridors. So let me introduce him more fully. Richard is a leading expert in technology law by the Legal 500 and Chambers in Partners. He advises on an array of matters, including outsourcing, e-commerce, data protection, and contracts. Richard advises on the adoption of new technologies from development through procurement and implementation to support and resale. He's worked with technology suppliers, such as Vodafone, BT, Tech Data and NTT Data, as well as their customers, including many of the UK's largest retailers, banks, government departments, and charities. He also heads up a Census, which is a program for in-house lawyers and business leaders, focusing on the needs of general counsel, data protection officers, and business owners. He's trained several hundred in-house lawyers and is a regular speaker at data and digital law events on topics such as dealing with data breaches, smart contracts, blockchain, and NFTs. So for all these reasons, but just as importantly, his passion for engaging wider audiences and his generosity with his time, I'm delighted to welcome Richard's voice to our series and hand him the floor. Richard, over to you, and please do feel free to share your screen with us.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks very much, and good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is, as Lloyd said, is Richard Nicholas, and I identify as an AI lawyer, and in this session, what I'm planning to cover is, first of all, what an AI lawyer does, so what's involved in that, what's meant when you're working on an AI project. So for some of you who might be looking at that area of law, that might be useful. I'm looking at what actually happens in AI projects versus what's meant to happen, because there is a distinction, because AI projects inevitably involve humans. I'll be looking at what that means for firms and businesses that are implementing AI right now, but I'll also look at what this means for non-AI lawyers, so lawyers who are not involved in AI, and for future lawyers, what this might mean for, as Lloyd has given the series title, The Future of Law. And so where I'd like to start with this is just looking at AI projects. Now, for anyone here who has done any level of science, and by science I mean looking at science from a very junior age, hopefully when you were in your when you were at school, what you might have learned is that when you're doing any sort of science experiment, the sort of thing that the teacher would give you is firstly to look at what you're expecting to happen, and also what actually happened, because typically schools are keen to develop the skills of observing and critically evaluating what actually happened as opposed to the theory. And the theory of a science experiment might be something like, well, we'll all heat the solution together, the liquid should turn white, give off steam, we'll dip pH paper into it, and if it turns blue, then it proves that we created an alkali. And inevitably, what actually happens, of course, is that Billy from the back row decides that he can make his voice turn funny by grabbing the Bunsen burner pipe, managed to get too close to the Bunsen burner, actually managed to set fire to his hairsprayed hair. This did actually happen to someone I know who's a junior teacher in one of his first science lessons. But there's a difference between what actually happened and what we were expecting, and for that reason it's worth looking at for AI projects, what you would expect to happen, what should happen, the sorts of sort of classical theory of an AI project, if you like, and what actually happens in practice, given that, as I say, we are dealing with humans. Well, the theory of an AI implementation, rather like any software development, any large IT project, is you typically work in stages. And this is just an example of the sorts of stages you might have. You might have a planning stage, design stage, development, and implementation. And in theory, what you might do as a lawyer, particularly an in-house lawyer, if you've got the team around you, you'd speak to the team and you'd work out, okay, what's the business problem that you're trying to solve with AI? What's the thing that you think you could do better, cheaper, quicker? What will be the result that you're trying to get, and how will you determine success? What will that look like? So you actually decide what the criteria will be for success. Then you typically look at, okay, we've got limited resources. What can you prioritize? What's the best problem to solve? What's actually going to really make a difference for the organization? You get together a group of stakeholders, other people in the business, and they're the sorts of people who are aware of the risks and the impact on the rest of the business, because typically an AI project isn't limited to one area. It crosses across various parts of the business. And you go through this scoping process. Now, that's typically what you should do in theory. In practice, of course, what actually happens is someone, typically in management, often someone fairly senior, sees a shiny object, sees an AI solution which looks brilliant. They go through the sales process, they listen to the sales process, and they then decide to implement it and work out the problems that it will solve. Now, that is a problem for lawyers. It's a problem for the business as well. The problem is that typically the AI solution is expensive because there's no budget. the business hasn't put together the budget, that worked out the priorities that it was meant to solve. It actually solves the wrong problem. So it solves a problem that is less important to the business than the one that the business would have liked it to solve. The people implementing it resent it because they've not been engaged in the process. They don't know why they're having to do this thing differently. And there is inevitably, whenever you introduce AI, a level of concern and resistance about whether this is going to replace jobs, whether this is going to replace something that went before. And from the in-house lawyer's perspective, or even the external lawyer's perspective, you can find that you're reviewing terms, but they're the terms for the wrong solution. So you're looking at a solution that the business has looked at, but actually the solution is wrong. So whether you get the warranties and the indemnity clauses and the acceptance terms, none of that matters because it's the wrong thing. They're looking at the wrong thing for the wrong problem. And that's because, we'll come back to this in a moment, that's because they didn't ask the right questions at the beginning. So look at that, why that's important for non-AI lawyers shortly. But typically the next stage of an AI implementation is to design the solution. And what that means is you look at the data that the business needs and the quality of that data. Is it the right sort of data? Can it be used for the purposes that you intend it to be used for? Have you got the IP rights? Have you got the rights under data protection law? You look at the terms and conditions of the AI provider and see what they say what you can use it for, say who owns the IP in the output and those sorts of things. And you ought to be looking at the ethical risks of the solution. So if you're developing something that makes decisions about people, and particularly automated decisions about people, and if that decision will have a significant effect on people, then people have a right to prevent that happening. This Article 22 of GDPR prevents automated decision making, or at least gives the right to an ability to appeal that decision. You also want to be looking at issues around what data's been used for this in terms of race and gender, and the risk of automation bias. That's the risk that people rely on the output of the computer and they decide that whatever the AI has said is the right answer. You'd look ideally at what the rest of the business will be doing with the results that come out. And if you're involving personal data in any way, you'd want to carry out what's called a DPIA, a data protection impact assessment, to make sure that you've considered carefully what the data will be used for, where it's come from, whether you're controller or processor of that data. And you'd be looking at those sorts of issues, and you'd appoint a governance team. That governance team in the business is the person or people who are able to make decisions. So if the AI creates an output that is wrong, who are the people who are going to decide that? Who are the people who are going to make decisions about how the AI will be used, where it will be used? Ideally, you'd get a group of people who can make those decisions within the business. Now, that's the theory, but we're dealing with people. So what happens in practice? Well, nobody cares. If you're the lawyer, one of the challenges that you often come up against is that the business people in the business, the IT people in the business, the commercial people in the business, and particularly the person who's just bought the AI solution, who wants it to work, they don't care. They are not bothered that these are the sorts of issues that you need to go through. And I've had this experience several times with clients where you actually just have to slow the process down because you need to make sure that you're going through this element of checking. And the sorts of questions you're getting is, have you finished yet? Why is this taking so long? Why is this design process taking so long? And what that means is, if you don't get the engagement of the business in that design process, in actually making sure that the data is right for the purpose, then there can be restrictions on the use. You might not actually be able to use the AI for the purpose that you intended to. You've also got a lack of engagement, which means the people who will then use the AI haven't been involved. And that's a problem because, again, it's this issue of if you've not been involved in the solution, you're less likely to accept it. So employees who have not been involved in the actual process of getting the data together, of understanding what the solution is for, are less likely to accept that solution. And that can be a problem in terms of actually making sure that the solution works. And if you've got bad data going into the AI, well, you get bad results. Typically garbage in, garbage out, I believe, is the polite way of describing that process. So that's the sort of issue that you can be up against if you don't do that second process. And then when it comes to the third and fourth process, well, the next stage is to develop and implement the AI. Development is about creating the solution, about getting the data together and getting the AI trained, ideally in a test environment, ideally not on your existing customers, carrying out a readiness assessment to see if it works, so testing and actually seeing if the AI does what you thought it would do. You test different models to see what works best, and you go for the one that works best, and you sort of iterate. You'd sign off against your initial goals, and the most important thing from a legal perspective, from an ongoing audit perspective, is to document everything. So document what you did, how you got there, the decisions that were made, who made them and why, because in the event of an audit from a regulator, for instance, the ICO, then you're going to have to show that information. You're going to have to show how you got to where you got to, why you took the decisions you did, and what level of due diligence you carried out on the AI. And then the final stage is implementation. This is
Richard, sorry, can I just interrupt your flow there, because I'm conscious that we went from 19 participants to 106 while you were talking through the slides, and quite a few people won't have heard my announcement about the Q&A. So there is a Q&A. There is a Q&A function on this webinar. The chat has been disabled because we had quite a few sign-ups and wanted to keep it more manageable. So if you have a question based on Richard's content, as you go along, you can put it in the Q&A, and Mike Butler and I will be monitoring that for the Q&A session at the end. Sorry to disturb you, Richard.
No problem at all. And for those who have just joined, what we're doing at the moment is just talking through a typical AI implementation. Not because I'm suggesting that you might want to become an AI lawyer necessarily, although some of you may, who knows, but also to look at that as an example of the sorts of work that you might do as an AI lawyer, but also the effect of AI on that process itself. And we talked about the four-stage process, typical of this sort of planning, then designing, then developing the solution, and then implementing. And implementation is one of the things that makes an AI project different to a typical software or IT project, because implementation is more important for AI because there needs to be a level of monitoring. There was an MIT study recently published which looked at the risks of AI, and that came up with, it was intended to be as comprehensive as possible, looking at all the different sort of risks that there might be, including, of AI becoming sentient, or AI, or all of the other sorts of issues that could arise with AI. It came up with 700. And of those, 65% of those risks were things that occur not on the original go live, if you like, of the AI, not when the thing is installed, but actually sometime afterwards. And there's various reasons why AI projects, why AI solutions go wrong. And typically it's because the data changes, the information changes, there are things that are not anticipated, or indeed sometimes the AI does exactly what the AI is meant to do, but the human hasn't thought of the consequences. And if you want to see some examples of that, there's a good website actually called incident.ai, where various things that have gone wrong with AI are documented. Some of them with comedy effect, some bad translations, some with potentially dangerous effects. But sometimes the AI can work exactly as people anticipated it would, but the consequences are different, or are different to what you might expect. And for that reason, it's important to have, at the end of an AI project, an ongoing monitoring, an ongoing group of people who are monitoring the solution and seeing the results that come up and making decisions about the results that come up. Now, of course, in practice, what happens? Well, whoever wanted the AI solution in the first place, typically they just want to get on with it. They just want to get the thing going. They want to see the return on investment. They want to see the results, and that can be a problem because, well, often the solution that has been released into the business, it can have problems. It can develop problems over time because the data changes, or because there's an input which it wasn't expecting, or which wasn't in the training data. The result of that is that the staff hate it. And if they've not been engaged, they will point out the problems. They will look at the issues where it goes wrong, and they'll see this as the problem of the AI, and therefore this was never going to work, and this is why it doesn't work, and here are all the reasons why it doesn't work. And if you don't have ownership of the AI solutions, if you've not got a person who's responsible for monitoring it, you've probably also not got someone who's actually measuring the results and measuring the return on investment. They're not actually seeing what the AI is doing well, which means there's a level of complaints, concerns, employees are unhappy, the people who are being required to use it are being forced to use it against their will. Then they're concerned about their own roles, and therefore they're resistant to it in any case. So the project gets abandoned. And the CEO, well, what does the CEO do? Well, he looks for the next different shiny object. Now, I've seen this play out a few times. Now, I've worked on successful AI projects, as well as one or two that were less successful. But those are the sorts of things that can occur in an AI project and to a lawyer dealing with AI. But I'm conscious that not everyone on this call is either an AI lawyer or wants to be an AI lawyer. So there are some points from this which are relevant to both lawyers who are not involved in AI and also to future lawyers, so people who may be going into law at some point in the future. And first of all, for the lawyers who are not AI lawyers, who might be in some other area, whatever that may be, and whether that's in private practice or in-house, there's a message here which is actually AI is coming for you as well. Anyone in practice at the moment is likely to have received emails on a fairly regular basis from a wide range of AI solution providers. I know I certainly have, I know a lot of my colleagues have, and I suspect most people in law at the moment will be. Those solution providers, like the types of solutions looked at in the AI project, suggest great results. They suggest us all the sorts of drafting and research sort of solutions that they can provide. And the problem is, of course, lawyers are no different to any other business. There is a risk that actually, as lawyers, we go through this process ourselves. There's a risk that we end up going for the shiny object, not doing the due diligence, not working out the problem to be solved first, and actually just going for the AI solution. Now, of course, that's not the right way. It's not what we should be doing. Instead, there is a way that lawyers who are not involved in AI can make sure the process is better. And the key thing here is not to start with the tools. There are many different providers out there, many different tools, many of them based on a specific use case, most of them with some sort of API to a large language model, so whether that's OpenAI or Gemini or whatever. The point is not to start with the tools. Instead, look at what in practice could benefit from AI. And the way to discover this is actually just to start using the tools yourself, actually using AI, using one of the large language models, so using ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic or whichever of the tools. When you start to use it, there are a few things that you discover it can be used for, and you'll discover what it can be, what it's good at and what it's not good at. And Lloyd was talking about they're finding use cases where it is useful and where it's not useful. And one of the things that is quite humbling is actually AI, including ChatGPT, all of the large language models, they actually know your job really well. They know what you do, down to the very detailed parts of your role. They know the deliverables that you have to provide as part of that role, and they'll know how AI can help you. It can actually, AI, when you question it, can actually show you how it can help you with your role, and it can actually do some of those individual items in your role for you. And if you want to, if anyone doubts that, I'm very happy to do a 10-minute demo. I'm not going to do it on this call now, largely for tech reasons, but in 10 minutes I can actually show you exactly that, how well AI knows your role, knows how it can help, knows what it can do to help, and actually can give you the prompts to help. It used to be the case only a few months ago that it was thought there'd be careers in prompt engineering. Well, I think the evolution of AI has put paid to that in many ways. AI actually knows how to prompt better than most people do. But for most lawyers who are not involved in AI, just getting to know the tools is just getting to know how the AI works and the sorts of things that your job might benefit from is the key, rather than starting with the tools. But what if you're not involved? What if you're not a lawyer right now, but you're thinking of going into the profession? What does that mean for you? Well, there's a few things that I think you can take away from the process I've just described of going through an AI implementation. And the same is true for lots of projects that you might be involved in as a lawyer, whether it's a property deal or a corporate deal, technology deal, which is part of the project is about the law, the warranties, the indemnities, the liability provisions, those sorts of things. But a very large part of the deal is also about the questions that you ask. And we looked at the very start of that AI project. One of the questions which is the most important to ask is this the right solution? Are we fixing the right problem? Because if you're not fixing the right problem, then actually looking at the contract won't help, because it's a contract that deals with the wrong problem. And so asking better questions is a skill that I think is going to be absolutely key as key to the future of law. There's an excellent book actually just I put on screen called "Questions Are the Answer," in which the author talks about, as humans, we are predisposed to answer questions. If I was to ask, what's the first rule of Fight Club? You could probably give me an answer. In fact, you've probably already thought of the answer even as I finished the question. We are predisposed to do that, but answering questions is the easy bit. It's also the bit that AI does really well. Actually answering questions, the core, I think, of a legal practice going forwards is going to be asking the right sorts of questions and asking better questions, as indeed it is at the moment, even with AI projects, and making sure that you're asking the right questions. The other thing I think is going to be core going forwards in future law are what's often referred to as soft skills, skills in dealing with people, actually human skills, in involving a team, and in communicating a vision, and in persuasion and engagement. All of these things are skills worth learning that you can get better at, and I think will make a huge difference. In the reason I went through an AI project and the sorts of things that you might go through if you're dealing as a lawyer with an AI project is some of the problems you might face will be resolved by getting people involved early and actually involving the stakeholders and talking through the vision of what the AI solution is meant to do, and making sure that those people are engaged from the start, persuading people to use it, and making sure that you get people's buy-in. Those are human skills. Those are not things that AI can do in an automated way. Similarly, there's the skills of actually in making sure that the AI is following a code of ethics, and making sure that is inserted into the system. Because there are certain things where you need a human in the loop, a human involved in a project, in order to make sure that the AI is not coming up with solutions that don't benefit the business. And the third thing is just being prepared to work with people and in areas that are unfamiliar. I think this is going to become more important as well. An example of that for my own practice, dealing with issues of AI. Of course, it's not as if I was dealing with AI 24 years ago when I qualified, but I was dealing with tech, and then I was dealing with GDPR, and now I'm dealing with AI. And in each case, it's a new skill set, and in every single case, it has been worth speaking to people who know about different things than law. So the sorts of people who've been really useful to me in terms of my practice at the moment have been people like computer scientists, people who do cybersecurity, people who know how to manage teams, project managers, those sorts of people. And I think as lawyers, we're going to have to be prepared to work with more of those sorts of people in fields that we're unfamiliar with, and dealing with areas we're unfamiliar with, because I think that's going to be key to any practice going forwards. And I think AI will only accelerate that. It will accelerate the rate of change, and it will mean that we need to be asking better questions, using human skills, and being able to deal with those other sorts of people. So that's largely what I was going to talk about today. I've got some materials about AI projects and AI and the law and that sort of thing on LinkedIn, and there's a QR code there. And if you did want that demo of how well AI knows your role, and if you want to see for yourself in quite scary vision how well AI knows you, possibly better than you know yourself, I can show you that in a 10-minute demonstration. That's the second link there. Meanwhile, if anyone has any questions, I'm very happy to pick those questions up for anyone who has them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. I see Mike's turned his camera on, so we might be fielding some of the questions that are coming in the Q&A on the published stream there, Mike. While you're picking out the questions in order, I just wanted to say the message that you finished on, or the messages that you finished on about what you class as soft skills, or could be have been described as human skills in other repositories. Interested participants on this call can look to the Future of Legal Practice series webpage, which Richard's recording will be on in the next few days, and there is a session on that by Dan Kane, who I know is someone you work closely with, Richard, as well, on that exact topic. Is essentially in simple terms, what can I do to maintain my my sort of professional value in this era. So I just wanted to jump in to say that it seems to me that there's a crossover between the people who have become and historically are GDPR experts within an organization, and now that AI is really sort of coming alive, I wonder whether there is that crossover in personnel, or if there's not, is there a kind of vacancy on a team's perspective within organizations? And then I will hand over to Mike to raise some questions from the Q&A with you.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, and I deal with lots of in-house lawyers across lots of different industries, yes, I've found that completely. Actually, the people who were dealing with GDPR are often now the people dealing with AI governance, and that's not surprising, really, because it's a similar idea. There's the technology, there's the IT procurement in terms of the buying of the technology, the putting a project together, but then once it's in place, the same sorts of things that were relevant to GDPR, particularly the duty of accountability and the duty to ensure. One of the significant changes with GDPR was the movement from having to make sure you didn't do anything wrong, which was the old law, to actually positively having to show that you're doing something right, and actually having to keep records and having to keep records of decisions you've made, so that you could be accountable, so that people can follow the decision-making process. That's exactly what's happening with AI, in terms of businesses having to keep those records and having to show the sorts of due diligence that they've been through.
Thanks, Richard. So we've got about 15 minutes. Mike.
Yeah, Richard, there's some tricky ones coming your way.
Okay.
We'll try and help here as well. So first one, which is a great question from Eleanor. Are you aware of any cases in which organizations were successfully sued for discriminatory, unsupervised machine learning?
Am I aware of any cases? Not so far. We've seen some reputational risks, and we've certainly seen some things play out in the media. For instance, where was there's been various. There's been sporting brands. There's been cosmetics companies that have chosen models, and those models are all of a particular race, and it's been shown that searching for a particular type of profession has brought up a particular gender. So I've seen the outcome, but those have been played out in the media. I'm not aware of yet any case law on that. There may well be, and there may be in the US in particular.
Eleanor, you might just, it's not quite on point in terms of they weren't sued for discriminatory unsupervised machine learning, but there've been a lot of legal cases against a company called Clearview, which involves scraping images off the web and then creating a huge database. It's not quite what you're asking, but have a look at their decisions. They've been fined by regulators throughout the EU, and they've also, I think, even been subject to legal action in the US. And I think, Richard, possibly that reputation one, were you thinking of Google's launch of Gemini as well in its first, yeah, that had a particular, that was a particularly bad example of, you know, or real theme of unsupervised machine learning. Here's it, just to getting even more difficult with the questions. From Anne here, how are AI solutions disrupting traditional hourly billing models at firms, given that the tech can perform routine tasks in a fraction of the time? And what is preventing, and this is getting harder, what is preventing clients going directly to these solutions as they become more sophisticated and cutting out the middleman of the lawyer, as progress will only be exponential? I think it's a great couple of questions.
It's a good question. And this is still something that's playing out. Just before I come on to that, actually, one thing just on the last point as well, you mentioned Clearview, and there's an excellent book, The End of Privacy. Clearview, like you say, scraped millions of photographs from the internet without any sort of look at GDPR or consent or any grounds whatsoever. It was a case of, you know, moving fast and breaking things, and sort of letting lawyers pick up the issue, the mess afterwards. And that is, I do think that's a concerning, a very concerning way that Clearview have operated, and they're now offering services outside GDPR, so to law enforcement and to armed forces, for instance. To the point on hourly fees, it is interesting. I don't think we've yet seen mass adoption of AI by many law firms. I wouldn't say any law firms, because I can't speak for all of them. I do think you're right. I think that the hourly billing model must surely be at an end. I know I've said this before throughout my career. There are some things that AI can do extremely well, and I think those things, I think it will become. I think we're just at a tipping point at the moment. We are not yet at the point of mass adoption by business. I think a lot of businesses are not using AI and they're just getting to the point where it has been prevented throughout the organization, and they're just starting to use it for certain reasons. And that's quite significant, because it means, you know, governance and policies and those sorts of things. I think similarly in law firms, we are starting to see the adoption, and it is being used in certain use cases. So there are things like title searches and looking for various property-related searches, for instance, which are being done quickly and instantaneously by AI. There are many more areas, I think, that will be disrupted, and I think it will be difficult for law firms to justify not using AI for those, you know, due diligence, large-scale contract reviews. Why would you have a human doing that if an AI can do it? The challenge will be, of course, just making sure that those things are accurate, that they've been checked, that they. But I completely agree. And as for individuals going directly to AI, well, yes, that is happening. That is happening. We see that already. It has been the case for some time that individuals have been able to go to the internet and get a precedent for various types of document, of course. And I think law firms will have to adjust, and as lawyers, we will have to adjust.
And just to pick that up, there's another question which you've sort of answered, but I just want to press you on it, which is, what do you think the best example in a law firm is for using AI, the best use case? And is it related to using a baseline LLM? In other words, not something you have to customize, but something that's already off the shelf?
Good question. I've seen, so I'm at the point of we have piloted various AI solutions, including many well-known ones. Many of them are good at certain things. I think actually the LLMs, so the ChatGPTs, the Gemini, the Anthropic, they can be, this might be slightly controversial. I think a lawyer with an LLM with a problem that they know how to fix, a solution that they know how to deal with, is likely going to be better than a specific use case product. And that's only me speculating, and of course it's only the more the product designers use lawyers and use lawyers who know how to fix problems, I think the better they will get. But so far, I think that actually it is. I think you can get to a position where of a good solution to a problem using an LLM that is, well, at least as good as one of the solution providers.
And just to pick up on that, there's another question which relates to that, which is, as a law student or someone looking to enter the field, do you have any advice for how we might best prepare and make ourselves stronger candidates to work in the space? And I know you touched on this around prompting, but do you just want to speak to that again, Richard?
Yeah, I can do. I mean, getting a knowledge of the challenge is AI is moving at an incredible pace. Even in the last, in the last couple of years, we've seen, we've seen ChatGPT launched. We've seen sort of single prompts, provide me with a, do this, write this. We've seen that almost the prompts that involve barking an instruction at someone very junior, just do this, evolve to the point of actually quite sophisticated prompts where actually you can get a much better, much more refined solution by going through a particular structure or getting more information, right up to now, for instance, with the 1.0, where even that has changed, and the AI will do its own, will do its own reasoning. So I think keeping up to date with what is happening in AI, I think is not. Where I was going with this is, by the time you enter the workforce, AI will have moved on further. So there's very little that I can say in terms of things that will prepare you for what AI will be able to do then, because who knows? It's moving at such a pace that someone with better prediction ability would be better for that. But I think the core skills of learning how to engage a team, speak to people, and to use AI, I do think it's worth any student looking at how AI works and just using it for day-to-day tasks. I think it's actually quite a good skill in itself, because what you find is once you've been doing that for a while, you realize the things it's good at, the things it's not good at, how you might say things better to it, how you might get things done. I think one of the challenges, though, this wasn't something that was asked, but is worth bearing in mind. I'm seeing already a downside to AI, which is, as well as some fairly trivial things, such as people not being able to spell anymore, or using the wrong version of your or their, because AI doesn't care, so they don't need to make the distinction anymore. There's a risk with AI of really passive reading. So people, reading swathes of text, and because it's easy to read through swathes of text using AI, you may not be reading it and understanding it and getting the full value from it as if you were carefully listening. And I think there there are some challenges with AI that we need to be aware of as humans. And that is something that I am seeing for people who are using it a lot, is they're not necessarily reading with the same level of concentration as they might have done previously. So
Okay.
just being aware of that, those sorts of challenges.
That's a deep philosophical point about how much meaning comes through language as well. So that's an interesting one. I'm just conscious of the time, and I think I've got two more questions, and then just sharing of the slides at the end because someone would like the QR codes. But one question from Sophia, which is, you made an interesting point about AI knowing our roles better than we do. And she's just asking do you have any examples and any tips for how students could harness that power as law students?
I do. It's one of the. It's a tricky one to be able to. It's actually something I can demonstrate using AI, and it's quite scary when you see what it can do. Simply asking the question. One of the significant differences that you get with AI, and I'm sure many people have got there already, is from asking it to do something like barking an order at it, and actually asking it how it can help you. That change in mindset to asking the AI how it can help, and specifically how it can help, and going through that process, you get surprisingly good results for asking it to help you rather than telling it what to do.
Okay, interesting. Just got one there's a couple of questions which I'm going to put into one, which is a bit of a theme here, which is, what are the ethical guidelines for law firms, and are there any official or unofficial sources, outside of the law here, that would help, so that you are staying on, you might be complying with the law, but be going the next step to sort of ethical compliance. There's a couple of questions along those lines. So how can firms try and ensure compliance with ethical standards?
Okay, and there's quite a long answer I could give to this one, but there are ethical frameworks. One of the best known in the US is called NIST, which is NIST. I'd love to remember what that stands for, but I can't. But it is the NIST framework sets out various things that you want from AI and the sorts of issues that it ought to bring up. It's a framework, so it doesn't have the force of law. There are various other frameworks along those lines, and I believe certainly the ICO. One great source of information actually is the ICO website. So the ICO, the Information Commissioner, is the main regulator for. It is the regulator in the UK for data, but it's actually the most active regulator for AI, and you'll find a great deal on there. And I believe that the SRA has also been advising on guidelines. I think the SRA has actually been advising on guidelines for law firms. Now, I don't think that's been published yet. I think that's still in a consultation phase. But I would suggest the NIST. If you look for NIST, that's the core framework. Most sort of ethical frameworks are based on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks,
Lloyd.
Mike.
Are we all right for time, or are we doing?
I'm gonna tailor. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention. It's on the Q&A now. Sally McLaren in a Temple, again, someone who I would thoroughly recommend giving a follow on LinkedIn. Sally puts out great content. She has signposted people in response to the opening question, which I think was Eleanor's, to a first tier tribunal scrutiny. I can't go any further than that because I'm just looking at the title there. As you said, Mike, could we ask Richard to share, as we close out, your QR code slide, and that can be captured by attendees. What I just want to do is to heartily thank you, Richard, for spending your evening with us. That was really enlightening, and again give a nod to the work that Browne Jacobson are doing, the outreach work on this. You made me feel so welcome there, and I know participants on this call will have had same experiences with you and with Browne Jacobson more broadly. Just if I may finish on a plug for the next event in our Future of Legal Practice series, that will be here in our lovely Bush House building on the 14th of November, and that is going to be about class actions and looking at that from all sorts of perspectives and designed for all levels of knowledge. Richard, your colleagues, your network, very welcome to come along and have a beer and a glass of wine with us then, as is everyone on this call. But for now, thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Mike, for helping me with the Q&A, and mostly thank you to Richard and also to Shauna and our events team. Good night.
Thanks very much.